What happens when the court stops asking politely and starts taking money directly? That's the question at the center of everything unfolding right now, and it's exactly why so many people are paying closer attention than ever, because this situation has officially crossed a line. It's no longer about reminders, requests, or even public disagreement. It's about enforcement. The kind of enforcement that doesn't rely on cooperation, the kind that moves forward whether someone is ready or not. And at the center of this moment are Melody Shari and Martell Holt, whose long-running legal story has now reached one of its most serious turning points yet. For years, people have watched the ongoing back and forth between Melody Shari and Martell Holt unfold through court filings, custody updates, financial disputes, and repeated legal steps that never quite seem to settle anything permanently. Every few months, there's been something new, another document, another disagreement, another development that keeps the situation active. And while many assumed it would eventually slow down or resolve quietly, what's happening now shows the opposite. Instead of fading out, this situation has escalated into something far more structured and far more serious, because this time it's not about what might happen, it's about what's already in motion. At the center of this escalation is a judgment that had already been decided. The court had ruled that $7,000 was owed. That number wasn't being debated anymore. It was official, documented, and legally binding. But according to the latest filings, that payment was never completed, and that detail changes everything, because once a judgment exists, it carries legal weight. It's not a suggestion or a flexible agreement. It's an obligation that must be fulfilled, and when that obligation isn't met, the court doesn't just wait indefinitely. It takes the next step. In this case, that step was initiated by Melody Shari, and it moves the situation into an entirely different category. That next step is wage garnishment, and this is where the tone of the entire situation shifts. Because garnishment is not a warning, it's not a second reminder, it's the legal system stepping in and saying that the time of waiting has ended. Instead of relying on voluntary payment, the court authorizes money to be taken directly from income sources. That means the responsibility doesn't sit in someone's hands anymore. It becomes part of a controlled legal process. Payments are no longer optional. They are automatic, structured, and enforced through official channels that continue operating until the full amount is collected. What makes this even more impactful is how the numbers have changed over time. The original $7,000 didn't stay the same. Because the payment wasn't made when it was supposed to be, interest began to build, additional costs were added, and now the total has grown to over $8,000. That increase might seem like just a number on paper, but it represents something much bigger. It shows how quickly financial obligations can escalate when they're ignored. What starts as one amount doesn't stay there. It grows, it compounds, and it becomes more difficult to manage the longer it's left unresolved. And that's one of the clearest lessons people are taking from this entire situation. Understanding how garnishment works is also a key part of this story. There's a common misconception that it means everything is taken all at once, but that's not how the system operates. The court follows strict guidelines designed to balance enforcement with basic financial protection. In this case, up to 25% of disposable income can be withheld, or a smaller amount depending on federal wage limits. That means there are safeguards in place to ensure that a person can still meet basic living needs. But at the same time, the system ensures that the debt is being paid consistently. It's not random and it's not unlimited. It's structured, calculated, and designed to work over time. And that's where another important detail comes in. This is not a one-time action. Once wage garnishment begins, it continues. The withheld amounts are processed regularly and directed through the proper legal channels until the full balance is cleared. There are no pauses based on convenience, no resets based on circumstances. It becomes a steady, ongoing process that operates in the background, gradually reducing what is owed. That consistency is what makes it so effective, and also what makes it feel so serious. Because once it starts, it doesn't rely on cooperation anymore. It relies on the system.
What adds another layer of complexity to this situation is the involvement of employers or financial institutions. Once the garnishment order is issued, these third parties become responsible for carrying out part of the process. They are required to respond to the court, provide information about income or assets, and follow the instructions for withholding funds. They are also asked specific questions about whether they currently owe money, whether they will owe money in the future, and whether they hold any property connected to the individual involved. This transforms the situation from a private matter into a broader legal process involving multiple participants. And if those third parties fail to respond or ignore the court's instructions, they can face consequences themselves. That's how seriously the system treats enforcement at this stage. It's not just about collecting money, it's about ensuring that every part of the process is followed correctly and completely. Even if employment changes, the process doesn't simply disappear. There are requirements to report changes, to submit any withheld funds, and to maintain continuity in the collection process. This prevents the situation from being avoided through technicalities or sudden shifts in circumstance. Naturally, the public reaction to all of this has been intense. Wage garnishment is one of those terms that immediately signals seriousness, and people respond to it in different ways. Some see it as a clear example of accountability. They believe that if a court has ruled that money is owed, then that obligation should be met without delay, and that enforcement is a necessary step when it isn't. Others feel that situations like this should be resolved before reaching this level in the first place, and they question how things escalated to this point in the first place. That divide in opinion is part of what keeps the conversation active. At the same time, it's impossible to separate this moment from the larger history between Melody Shari and Martell Holt. Their legal story includes not just financial matters, but also custody arrangements and ongoing responsibilities tied to their past relationship. And when people see multiple legal issues happening at once, they begin to connect them. They form a broader narrative based on what they observe. Whether those conclusions are fully accurate or not, they influence how the situation is perceived. Each new document, each new development adds another layer to that perception. For many people watching this unfold, one of the biggest takeaways is how preventable escalation can be, because at its core, this situation started with a defined amount and a clear obligation. If that obligation had been handled earlier, the additional interest, the legal filings, and the enforcement process might not have been necessary. That's the part that resonates with a lot of viewers. It's a reminder that delaying responsibility often leads to bigger consequences, not smaller ones. And those consequences don't just stay financial, they extend into reputation, stress, and long-term impact. This moment also highlights something important about the difference between public conversation and legal action. There can be endless opinions, debates, and reactions online, but none of those things actually resolve a financial obligation. What creates real change is the legal process. Court orders carry authority, they create structure, they produce outcomes, and in this case, Melody Shari has chosen to rely on that system rather than waiting for voluntary action. That decision shifts everything from uncertainty to inevitability. And that's what makes this moment feel so significant, because once a process like this, wage garnishment, begins, it doesn't usually stop quietly. It continues step by step, payment by payment, until the balance is cleared. It becomes part of a system that operates consistently regardless of outside noise or opinion. And while the full outcome will take time to play out, one thing is already clear. This is no longer a situation defined by waiting. It's defined by action, by structure, and by a legal process that is already in motion. So now, the question isn't whether something will happen, it's how it will unfold from here, because the system has already been activated, the process has already begun, and as long as that remains true, this story is far from over.